Our next presenter will be Doris.
Thank you. As you said, I'm Doris. I am a PhD candidate as well as Rina in McGill. And I will be talking about a part of my thesis, which is related to health inequalities for cancer survival during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it has a special focus on multiple cause of death. And because of that, I'm going to stop a minute to explain why this is an interesting topic, at least for me. You'll see here, this is a medical certificate of death from Ontario, but it follows the international guidelines. So we're going to focus particularly in the cause of death section, which is the one, sorry, has the structure of the international standards. In the cause of death section of a death certificate, the certifiers are required and instructed to reconstruct the chain of events that caused the death in part one of the certificate, and they can also report contributing diseases or conditions that were part of the chain, were not part of the chain, but that contributed for the death to happen. However, these certificates are later processed, and we only choose one cause of death to be reported, which is known as the underlying cause of death. However, during the COVID pandemic, early in the 2020, WHO released guidelines to standardize what a COVID-19 death was. And among the rules, they said that a COVID-19 death might not be attributed to any other diseases, and they should be counted independently of pre-existing conditions. But additionally, in their practice guidelines, they said that if there were comorbidities, they had to be reported in part two of the medical certificate of causes of death. So as a contributing cause. Parallel to this, we know that the COVID pandemic affected the cancer care. There was disruption in diagnosis and in treatment. And that also, because of these rules, we imagined that there could be some alterations of these practices for cause of death certification. Both of these things might have been different across different socioeconomic groups, which could lead to potentially exacerbating pre-existing inequalities. So we studied education-related health inequalities in the Canadian cohort that had diagnosis of cancer, and we used both the traditional underlying cause of death and also a weighted multiple cause of death approach for this analysis. We used a retrospective cohort using the 2016 CanCheck data. We used the possible link to the cancer registry, which had diagnosis until 2021, and vital statistics, particularly the death database until 2021 as well. And here, same as Brianna, we used all the contributing causes that were listed in the certificate. Our exposure was the level of education, and our outcomes were relative inequality, which we measured through cause-specific hazard ratios, and absolute inequality using the cumulative incidence functions. And like I mentioned, we use this determining the death, a cancer death, using the underlying cause of death, and also using a weighted multiple cause of death. And what do I mean by weighting cause of death is that we use everything in the certificate and assign partial weights that sum up to 1. So we maintain the person as the unit, but we are considering all other reported causes. For this, like I mentioned, I used the data from the CanCheck. I linked it to the cancer registry and to the death database, and ended up with a working data of 180,000 people. So as analysis, as I mentioned, we use Cox models for the cause-specific hazards, and we use fine and gray models for estimating sub-distribution hazards, and later the cumulative incidence functions, which estimated up to 5 years. We did secondary analysis for the 4 major cancer types: prostate, breast, colorectal, and lung. And we also divided our data in a pre-COVID data set and a during COVID data set. And so as a quick overview of the main findings, we see here in this graph at the top, the total follow-up cohort, and then the 2 secondary cohorts that I mentioned, pre-COVID and COVID. And we see the UGOT, underlying cause of death, cause-specific hazard ratios, and then the multiple cause-specific hazard ratios in orange and in green, as you see there. And the main results are that the relative inequality of the total cohort and of the other cohorts was very high. But there were no significant difference between the 2 methods that we use, either the underlying cause or the multiple cause of death. And we also see that these high inequalities were sustained during the pandemic, and that there were basically the two methods were indicating the same outcome. So I'll stop there. I think I'm on time. So thank you. If you have any questions, those are my co-authors, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to present and for my funding.